training camp. I was in attendance and I just got home. I'm going to be recapping everything and answering all of you guys' questions right after this.
Let's go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dominate on three. 1, 2, 3. Dominate.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. I got my guy Kali shouting at me already. Mike, thank you guys all for tuning in. But guys, football is back. We started training camp today, day one of training camp. It was amazing. You know, the 49ers are back in football. And just overall, I'm just excited that football is back. Like 49ers Sickness said, day one is in the books. So I'm going to be recapping everything, talking about what I saw, the most important things, and then also answering any of your guys' questions. I know a lot of you shouted me out on Twitter with your questions. I'm going to be over there answering all of yours as well. But let's get into it. First of all, let's start with what everybody wants to hear. How do the quarterbacks perform? You know, we've got three quarterbacks currently on the roster: Trey Lance, Nate Sudfeld, and Brock Purdy. If you're looking just based off numbers, Lance finished 9 of 11, Sudfeld finished 11 of 11, Purdy finished 4 of 5. But let's really break down how the quarterbacks played. They were practicing for a while. Lance obviously looked like the clear starter. He looked really good today. He was accurate with his throws, not only in the warm up session, but also in the 7-on-7 session as well. Sudfeld was the clear backup. And I want to get something clear before I move on. This isn't a quarterback competition for QB2. Nate Sudfeld by far is a better quarterback than Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy just doesn't look like an NFL quarterback right now. And I'm not talking about skill set. I'm not talking about mental wise. I'm just talking pure skill set. Brock Purdy doesn't have a quarterback arm. He really doesn't have that NFL arm right now. When you see how he throws, it's very evident that Brock Purdy just doesn't have the arm strength that the other two quarterbacks have. It takes a while for throws to be thrown out to the flat, for checkdowns. It takes a while. Although he did have a good throw, which I'll mention later. Trey Lance had a pretty good day. Overall, there weren't many deep passes. It was a lot of checkdowns, a lot of throws to tight ends, and a lot of throws right over the middle for the 49er quarterbacks. There weren't many deep throws, although the best throw of the day did come from Nate Sudfeld. He hit Malik Turner on the sideline for about a 40-yard touchdown or even more over a leaping cornerback who made a bad read on the play. It was a beautiful ball. Malik Turner made a good play on it, and it was a touchdown. That was the best pass of the day. Additionally, at the end, Purdy had a zipper to tight end Jordan Matthews to end practice today. It was a nice throw on a slant route coming in. But overall, Lance had a good day. Like I said, 9 of 11 in completions. And Lance was the one who really tested a little more. He had a nice run as well on an RPO kind of option. He faked to Jeff Wilson Jr., had a 15-yard-ish run as well. So, you know, you're going to be seeing this dual threat kind of quarterback play from Trey Lance. It's not only going to be him standing in the pocket, although he is pretty good in the pocket, you're going to be seeing him run as well. And not only on designed runs, but on runs where he believes he can make plays as well. And so that's something that we saw from Lance. Just reading it overall out loud. Lance hit Mitchell on a check down. He hit Ray McLeod on a throw. He hit a comebacker to Ayuk and a bullet to Jennings is what I wrote down. Additionally, Nate Sudfeld, he had a nice throw, like I said, to Malik Turner. He had a couple of throws to tight ends and check down, 5-yard check down to Mitchell. And one of his throws, Brandon Ayuk, he was 11 of 11, but one of those completions did take a while to complete. If pads were on and if a defensive line was coming after him, it would have been a sack. So keep that in mind. I essentially counted that as a sack. But the quarterbacks were pretty good today. Obviously, without pads, though, you take it with a huge grain of salt. But the quarterbacks were pretty good today. Moving on to the most important part of today, the offensive line competition. When you talk about the offensive line, you've got obviously Trent Williams there. Mike McGlinchey has returned, and you've got Aaron Banks coming in. But it's the two middle spots, that center and that right guard spot, that are very important. And before I continue, yes, this is true. Emmanuel Mosley had a beautiful pass breakup. He was one of the positives on the defense today. Beautiful pass breakup on Trey Lance. But moving forward to the offensive line, the most important part of today, guys, we got some good news, or not good news, but we got some news. Jake Brendel was the starter at center to start practice today. The 49ers, what they do before like 7-on-7s and stuff like that is they have centers snaps at the quarterbacks warm up. Brendel was warming up with Trey Lance. Daniel Brunskill was warming up with Nate Sudfeld. And I think it was Jason Poe on the first team warming up with Brock, or as the third team guy warming up with Brock Purdy. But there were rotations. Brunskill did get work in with Trey Lance as well. Keaton Sutherland was the second teamer in that string, and Donovan West got reps as well. But most importantly, it's that Brendel Brunskill center competition. Yesterday, you heard Kyle Shanahan say that you are going to see some Daniel Brunskill center action in this offseason, and Daniel Brunskill was inserted into the first team lineup for the second half of today's practice. Brunskill was. Brendel was the first team starter for the first half of practice, and then you saw Brunskill creep in towards the second half, and he was the starter at center for the 49ers. Right now, it seems like Jake Brendel has the hold on center, but I would not be surprised at all if Daniel Brunskill is your starting center for the 49ers in 2022. Remember, he played starting center for 8 games in 2020. He has that experience before. And while I personally would prefer him to have continuity at right guard, right now it looks like Jake Brendel and Daniel Brunskill will be the 49ers center competition for 2022. Now, let's talk about right guard. I've got a question here on how Burford looked, and this is the main thing. Spencer Burford, the dark horse candidate from minicamp, he was the starter at right guard, and he took all of the first team reps at right guard for the 49ers today. There wasn't another player that kind of moved in. You thought that Jalen Moore could potentially see some action at right guard. You thought Daniel Brunskill could, and maybe even Nick Zakelj. But yesterday, Kyle Shanahan said the rookies are going to get some run, and he proved that. The coaches seem to really like Spencer Burford. His athleticism is through the roof. We saw that during his testing at the combine, and he was the starter today at right guard. When you're talking about how the offensive line played, remember, no pads, so it's not really as important right now. Monday, I believe, is when pads will start coming on. Normally, the first 3 or 4 days are a ramp up time. Then you bring pads on. So next week is when the offensive line really gets its true test. But Spencer Burford was the first team starter today. And so that's very important. Moreover, Kali asked, how did Banks look? Now, again, like I said, there aren't pads on, but Banks was the first team starter at left guard as well. Your starting lineup on the offensive line was Colton McKivitz at left tackle, Aaron Banks at left guard, Jake Brendel, Spencer Burford, and Mike McGlinchey. Now, what happened to Trent Williams? He had an excuse day for some absence that Kyle Shanahan did mention after practice. So that was why Colton McKivitz took all of the left tackle snaps. Remember, Trent Williams was not there during the early part of the offseason during OTAs. Colton McKivitz was the starter at left tackle for that period as well. Now, on the right side, Mike McGlinchey, finally back in action, as well as Javon Kinlaw, who we'll mention in a minute, and Aziz Al-Shire. Both or all three players could have potentially gone on the PUP list, but were cleared by doctors this week and also are going to be practicing. They were practicing in full capacity today. All three look pretty good. And yeah, all three are welcome back on the 49ers. So that's something to mention. But going back to the offensive line, Jalen Moore did not see any time at right guard today. He saw all of his time really at right tackle. He was the backup to Mike McGlinchey. He took all the second team reps at right tackle. And the 49ers don't necessarily have many of the outside guys, right? They've got a lot of flexible guys, but not many tackle specific players. And so Jalen Moore was a guy that you saw there at right tackle. And I'll be honest, in the few reps that I saw Jalen Moore at right tackle today, he struggled. Remember, this is without pads, but he did struggle a little bit. There were 2 reps specifically. Drake Jackson blew by him on a pass on a pressure. I tweeted about that. And then just a play later, Nick Bosa blew by him, or a couple plays later, Nick Bosa blew by him as well on a pressure. And remember, this is without pads. You can't use your physicality, but that is something that you might want to monitor. Is Jalen Moore going to be able to hold at tackle, which he played last year and which he was benched for last year? Will he be forced to move into guard as a backup, or can he really compete at tackle? Because right now, I don't know what the position for Jalen Moore is. I personally thought he'd be in the competition to start at right guard, but right now, I'm not exactly sure. We'll see when pads come on and when more practices are happening, like tomorrow. That's something to mention on the offensive line. Um, Moving forward, or I guess real quick on the end of the centers, a lot of people really like Jason Poe. A lot of people like Donovan West, but I'll be totally honest. Jason Poe looks really, really small, guys out there. He doesn't look right now like an NFL ready offensive lineman. I personally have been of the opinion that he should spend time on the practice squad for the 49ers this year. They should groom him for potentially being an offensive lineman for the 49ers in the future. But right now, Jason Poe does not look like he has the build of an offensive lineman. He was clearly the smallest offensive lineman out there by a mile. And Donovan West, too, I think he still needs to be getting into shape a little more in terms of getting into an NFL ready body. And I get some news here. Ooh, some breaking news on stream. Dee Ford has been released apparently. I'll check this out later, but Dee Ford has been released, and I'll get to that when I speak about the defensive line. But let's go over the starting lineups for the 49ers on both sides of the ball. So to start, I told you guys the offensive line. We as well. It was the three receivers: Brandon Ayuk, Jawan Jennings, and I think it was Ray McLeod in there and started today. More on Ray McLeod in a minute. But those were the guys. You saw Kittle out there as well. You saw Juszczyk out there as well. It was a great good group today. Defensively, here was the starting lineup. Samson Ebukam, defensive end. Javon Kinlaw, Arik Armstead, Nick Bosa. Those were your four defensive linemen. Azeez Al-Shire, Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, your three linebackers. Charvarius Ward, Emmanuel Mosley, your two cornerbacks. Jimmy Ward, Talanoa Hufanga. So that was your base package, those 11 players in the starting lineup. And then when you move to the dime and nickel package, Darqueze Dennard did sub in. He is the starting slot cornerback as of now, which is something to note because I know a lot of people like Samuel Womack. I know a lot of people potentially wanted even a guy like Dante Johnson or somebody else in there as well. Darqueze Dennard is your starter as of now. Now, on the other side of the field, the second team, here was the unit. Jordan Willis, Hassan Ridgeway, Kevin Atkins, Kimoko Toure. Those are your four defensive linemen. Demetrius Flanagan Felds, Curtis Robinson, Oren Burks, your three linebackers. Diamond Lenore, Ambry Thomas, your two outside corners, and Tarvarius Moore was one of those safeties. Now, it is important to note Diamond Lenore has not seen action on the inside. He has been primarily an outside corner for the 49ers. He was the fourth string cornerback today behind Ambry Thomas. He was working with the second team. And on the Tariq Castro-Fields, Samuel Womack front, Womack was the inside cornerback. He spent all of his time in the slot. He was the second team slot cornerback when he was put in sub packages. And then Tariq Castro-Fields was seen on the outside. Right now, he's the fifth outside cornerback. It's unknown whether he will make it right now, but looking in, he is the fifth outside cornerback for the 49ers, and Samuel Womack is the backup slot cornerback as of now. As for rotations, when you're talking about the third team, Tariq Castro-Fields was seen on the outside, Kadar Holman was seen on the outside, and Quantrez Knight was seen in the slot. Kadar Holman did get some good action on the outside. He made a nice play as well. But those are your guys on the outside for cornerbacks. Going back to the first team, some of the substitutions for the first team, I think this is very important. You know how our defensive line is very deep. Here were the first four guys out after the starting unit of Ebukam, Kinlaw, Armstead, and Bosa. It was Kerry Hyder, Kevin Givens, Maurice Hurst, and Charles O'Menahue. Those were the four defensive linemen that came in after the starting four on the first team. So Hyder, he did get some action today alongside Drake Jackson, and then O'Menahue as well did get action as the top pass rusher behind Samson Ebukam. So what we're looking at right now with this 49ers defensive front, what I'm expecting as of now, just based on how these lineups rolled out, Ebukam is your starter because he's the best run defending edge opposite of Nick Bosa. So he is probably going to start for the 49ers in 2022. But Charles Omenihu is probably going to be there a lot on pass rushing situations alongside Drake Jackson. I'd expect in passing situations that you might move Charles Omenihu inside. He might be one of your interior pass rushers while Drake Jackson is there on your outside. But again, this is outside looking in. We still have a lot of time to go before training camp completes. Some other news on the defense, the linebackers. Obviously, a lot of people are very interested. How did Dre Greenlaw look? How does Aziz Al-Shire look? The three linebackers were out there. Al-Shire is now back after a couple of injuries. He had a shoulder surgery, I believe, and he also had a knee surgery. So those two people or those two injuries, it seems like he's healed from them. And then Dre Greenlaw, injured all of last year, played in only 3 games because of a groin injury. He is out there as well. And Fred Warner, who missed the entire first half of the offseason with lower body injuries, he was present at camp but did not participate. He is now out there as well. Now, the linebacker rotations, it was those three, then Curtis Robinson, Demetrius Flanagan-Felds, and Oren Burks. Those were your next three that you saw out there. Curtis Robinson was the middle linebacker, Demetrius Flanagan-Felds on your left side, and Oren Burks on your right side as your will. Then the final three linebackers, it was Jeremiah Gemmel in the middle, Segun Olabi on the left, and Marcelino McCrary Ball on the right. Those were your three linebacker rotations going forward or heading into training camp. We'll see if one of those undrafted rookies, one of those bottom three guys in Olubi and Jeremiah Gemmel, or in Marcelino McCrary Ball, can eclipse some of those guys on second team to potentially make the roster. But as of now, they're on the outside looking in. This kind of leads me to my next thing. Training camp surprises. Obviously, it's day one. You don't want to take away too much from it. But training camp surprises. Curtis Robinson, the linebacker, second-year player out of Stanford. The 49ers had him last year. And now I think Curtis Robinson has a good shot to make this roster. Now, you might ask how. The 49ers have Aziz Al-Shire, Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner, and then Oren Burks and Demetrius Flanagan-Felds. 5 linebackers, and they normally only carry 5. However, I think that Curtis Robinson has a shot to potentially eclipse Demetrius Flanagan-Felds, or should Flanagan-Felds get traded, Curtis Robinson could be that first guy to take his spot. He was looking pretty good out there today. And I don't mean in plays necessarily, but he was the middle linebacker and he was very vocal out there. He looked like a leader despite being so young at the linebacker position. He looked like a leader. And I think the coaching staff does like Curtis Robinson out there. He might be your middle linebacker behind Fred Warner. And you know how the 49ers have faced injuries with that linebacking group. I think they like Curtis Robinson. He's a guy who's athletic. He's a guy who can play that kind of defensive back linebacker hybrid position, play out in coverage, but he's also a guy who has the aggressive demeanor and the leadership that they want out of the linebacker spot. So Curtis Robinson, he is my guy to look out for. One other thing, I know a lot of you guys want to hear about Danny Gray. Where has Danny Gray been? Because there wasn't many updates after minicamp when he did have a hamstring injury. Danny Gray was out there today as a part of the receiver group. He also was returning punts. That's the underrated part. So the 49ers had a couple of players that were returning punts today. It was Ray McLeod, Danny Gray, Keyshawn Johnson, Marcus Johnson. Remember, last year the 49ers did struggle in that special teams unit. They didn't have really a solidified kick returner and had guys even like Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel have to go out there to return kicks and punts because they didn't necessarily have a guy that they could trust. Travis Benjamin was that guy last year, not necessarily a great option, is not with the team anymore. And the 49ers brought in a guy in Ray McLeod to do that capability. However, McLeod has had a somewhat of a fumble issue. He has 11 fumbles over the last 4 years. And so something to help Ray McLeod could be relegating him to just kick returns or to just punt returns and having a guy like Danny Gray with that elite speed be out there and helping him out. One thing though, both of those guys are blazing fast. You could definitely see the acceleration with Ray McLeod, and Danny Gray just has that burning speed. I could definitely see it just from the eye test that both of those guys live up to or even eclipse what their 40 times are. Ray McLeod's in the 4.5s. I think he's faster than that when you look at his acceleration, and Danny Gray obviously in the 4.3s. So those guys are they were pretty good today. McLeod especially. And so this kind of shows that they might be looking at extended opportunities on special teams, which does look like a significant improvement on paper, at least from the 2021 season. Shout out to Paul, obviously from the UK. Thank you guys for tuning in, and thank you for the kind words. Danny Gray returning punts does sound like a nice thing. I actually brought this up when Danny Gray was drafted that he could be a guy that returned punts. But the reason that I bring up the punt returners, the two other names, Marcus Johnson, Keyshawn Johnson. Both of those guys were signed by the 49ers, could be potentially competing for that sixth wide receiver spot. When you look at the wide receivers right now, you've got Deebo Samuel, you've got Brandon Ayuk, you've got Jawan Jennings, Ray McLeod, and then Danny Gray. But there's that sixth guy that still has to be kind of named in a way because those other five are locked. And there are players like Malik Turner, the two Johnsons, Austin Mack, Taysier Mack, Tay Martin. There's a ton of players that could fulfill that role. And probably one of the important roles that one of those receivers is going to have to play is special teams. So to see that both of these guys are returning punts, could potentially be gunners as well on the opposite end. I think that it is something of value to note because special teams might be the most important capability of that sixth receiver. Emiliano here says, if I'm one of the two Johnsons, then I'm hoping beyond hope that I make it as a punt returner to stay on the roster. This is an interesting point because when we talk about the sixth wide receiver, not only do they have to play special teams, but they do have to show some wide receiver hope. Flashback to last offseason. The 49ers had a very good returner in Sybil Webster, who was a pretty solid guy, both in the kick and the punt return unit. However, they released him. Why? Because he didn't show enough as a receiver. And Kyle Shanahan has made it very clear he likes players that have multi-dimensional talents. He doesn't like players that are only special teams standouts. He doesn't like players that, or he does like players that don't have special teams capability, but it is an added bonus if you do, right? So to me, if one of those two Johnsons makes the roster, it's not only because of their special teams ability, but it's also because they showed enough as a receiver in camp. We've yet to see if that can happen, but obviously when pads come on, that will be something to watch. Which of those guys will make plays, and which of those guys, out of the many guys fighting for that sixth spot, not only shows enough on special teams, but as a receiver to make the roster. Moving forward to kind of the 7-on-7 action and things like that. One thing that we saw a lot from the quarterbacks was targeting tight ends today. We saw Tanner Hudson, Jordan Matthews, Ross Dwelly, and George Kittle all have catches in the 7-on-7 action. And remember when we flash back to minicamp, 8 of Trey Lance's 12 passes in that first practice were to running backs and to tight ends. That might be a reoccurring theme this offseason and maybe even trickling into the season. The 49ers have George Kittle as a tight end, but also have many pass catching options that are vying for that tight end 2 or tight end 3 spot behind him and Charlie Warner. And so the 49ers might be looking to see who does Trey Lance really develop a connection with out of their many pass catchers, and how can the tight end group make an impact, whereas it hasn't made as much of an impact in years past, and it's been mainly the wide receivers. Kittle obviously is there, but it would be helpful if there's another receiving tight end in that room. I think Charlie Warner is a lock to make the roster, but out of the other options I just mentioned, Tanner Hudson, Jordan Matthews, Tyler Kroft even, and Ross Dwelly, it's going to be interesting to see who breaks out of that competition and who wins that tight end role. Swansong says, more passes to Juice, please. I would like this too. I think he honestly will see a little more action. And remember, last year, it's not that Juszczyk didn't see as much action. It's just that Garoppolo sometimes didn't complete those passes. So it's important to note that there are a lot of options on this roster. Trey Lance doesn't mind throwing to multiple guys. He's not honing in on Brandon Ayuk. He's not honing in on Jawan Jennings. He's not honing in on Ray McLeod. He's distributing the ball to many different receivers, which is very, very important. And so to me, that's something that I'm looking forward to. Who can be that receiving guy? Because to me, Kittle is a good blocker. Charlie Warner is primarily a blocker. I want to see another receiver in that tight end room with Trey Lance as opposed to Jimmy Garoppolo in the quarterback room. So to me, that's an important thing that I'm looking forward to, and something that I will be definitely eyeing as training camp kind of continues. If you guys haven't already, I see a lot of guys putting it in the chat. Thank you guys so much all for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to this channel. Be sure to like for this content. I will be here every single day after training camp, providing you guys my updates. And always be sure to drop your questions in the chat. I'm going to go up right now. I'm going to read all the questions in the chat and I'm going to answer them as well as the ones that you guys posed on Twitter. Thank you guys all for tuning in. And let's go ahead and see some of your questions. So Mariah here asks, did you notice a difference in what the quarterbacks were doing with the QB coach being different? It seems like they did some pointless blank with the last coach. Now, in the beginning part of practice, it was pretty much all warm-ups, right? What the quarterbacks do, all three of them are together. You get two throws each. One is to your left side. It's to the left. It's pretty much to the left sideline, and the second one is a deep ball towards the right side. And it's a variation of things. Not only are you standing in the pocket and making throws, but sometimes the coaches had the quarterbacks roll out to your right, roll out to your left, and make the throws on the run as well. This is where I pretty much noticed the difference between the quarterbacks. Trey Lance clearly has that arm strength. The balls were coming out as a cannon, and they were crisply accurate. That was the biggest surprise to me. Trey Lance was very accurate today, I believe at least, in warm-ups with his throws. Obviously, a lot of people have pointed out, oh, he might not have touch with his throws. The accuracy might be a concern, and people might be delusional because of that. But I actually thought Trey Lance was very accurate today compared to what people expected, and also very strong with his throws. I think that this is definitely a good signal for the 49ers because, like many have reported, 9 of 11 passing today. Pretty strong day. And even though a lot of it was checkdowns, you see the arm strength and the ability to make throws in tight windows because of how strong that arm is. I think it's definitely positive looking at Trey Lance. And I think that the quarterback group right now is Lance and Sudfeld. I don't think Purdy, like I said in the very beginning, I don't think Purdy is at all in the mix. I think that Purdy kind of is definitely a practice squad guy. I don't even think Purdy might be on the roster next year when Sudfeld becomes a free agent. I think the 49ers might look elsewhere as well, just because Purdy lacks the arm strength necessary. And while the 49ers haven't necessarily had super strong quarterbacks before as well, I don't know if Purdy is the best backup to Lance. I answered the Burford question and the Banks question. Dee Ford officially being released. Let me speak on this real quick. How does this matter? Well, Dee Ford, obviously, Kyle Shanahan has said Dee Ford is not going to be with the 49ers for how long have we heard that this offseason? He's finally officially released. John Lynch did talk about that during his press conference yesterday. And I think this is good for the 49ers. Why? Because you're finally moving on from a mistake that happened. You finally take you take your losses and you move on. And this also opens up another practice or not practice training camp spot for another guy. I think the 49ers could definitely benefit by adding another offensive lineman, but specifically a tackle. Because if Trent Williams isn't going to practice as much like he did last offseason, you might want another left tackle in there to see what they can get in the mix, or some swing tackle of sorts, just to see how the competition will go. I think that it could definitely be helpful if you get another guy in. And overall, I think it's good that they move on from Dee Ford. You have guys like Teray, you have guys like Drake Jackson, Omenihu, Jordan Willis. I can go on and on with the guys on this roster that you already have that will be more consistent contributors on that defensive line. This is a good move by the 49ers. I know you're losing about 5 million in dead cap this year, 5 million dead cap next year, but remember, I'm looking at it from a positive way. You save a million here, which could be helpful in a Deebo Samuel negotiation if he's requiring a high bonus or if you don't want to push that salary down. I think that this is a beneficial move for the 49ers, and they're just looking forward in 2022. Thank you guys all for the support so far. Let me go back and read some of the questions. I know I'd seen a couple more. Collie says that Omenihu is my sleeper this season. I actually agree. I think Charles Omenihu is going to have a great training camp and great season overall. We heard what he said with Brad. He's only been accustomed to the system really this year, It took him until the offseason for him to be fully acquainted with the 49ers. And like I said earlier, Omenihu was a part of that first unit um, outside of the starters, right? You saw Ebukam start, you saw Bosa start. But remember, the 49ers have different packages, right? That's their base package against run defending situations. That's why I don't really care who starts. I care who's in on pass rushing situations. And I think Omenihu will definitely be one of the key contributors on pass rushing situations. He's not much of a run defender, but pass rushing, that's where Omenihu's prowess is. And I can definitely see him playing a versatile role from the nine tech out all the way in as an interior pass rusher alongside Ark Armstead. So that's something important. And remember, we saw this last year towards the end of the year. Ark Armstead did have a decrease in snaps, which increased his effectiveness overall. But when you have one of your top players having a decrease in snaps to maybe around 70% of the snaps as opposed to 85%, you need somebody else that can pick up that extra slack. And I don't think that's going to be Javon Kinlaw at least early because he's recovering, right? And you don't know how he's going to fare as a pass rusher, at least early on. I think Omenihu could pick up some of that slack as an interior pass rusher for the 49ers, alongside a guy like Hassan Ridgeway or alongside Kevin Givens, who got second team snaps today. I think that is an interesting battle. Who will get those pass rushing snaps on the interior and on the exterior when those situations arise? Paul asks, I thought Croft was brought in for his blocking abilities rather than pass catching. I think so too, but he also did have a fairly solid pass catching season back in 2017 when he was with the Cincinnati Bengals. He's shown that ability before. I don't know if he's one of the guys that is a favorite to win that third tight end spot, but right now he's one of the guys in the mix. I think that he didn't necessarily show out today. I thought it was more Tanner Hudson, Jordan Matthews, and Ross Dwelly. Those were the three guys that caught passes today from quarterbacks while running routes, some and showcased their skill set. But Croft is in the mix for that third tight end spot. I'm very interested to see who pulls away as training camp comes along. Emiliano, thank you for your nice comments about the attention to detail. And guys, everybody that's in here right now, I will be hosting a space. It is currently 2 o'clock. In an hour, I will be hosting a space on Twitter at 3 p.m. to discuss the rest of training camp to see if you guys have any other questions. So make sure that you guys tune into that as well. Paul asks, what would you like to see, or what would I like to see at training camp? What I want to see is somebody else other than Darqueze Dennard come into that slot corner situation, be it Ambry Thomas, be it Samuel Womack, who took snaps at the slot in the backup situation. I want to see someone else other than Dennard try and get first team snaps and see how they respond. Because right now, Dennard is that guy, but I don't trust in, or it's not that I don't trust Dennard enough. I think that it'd be better off if Dennard didn't have a 53-man roster spot to begin. He's a veteran. He can be brought back after final original cutdowns. And I think the 49ers could even be better off without him overall. I think Womack has the ability. I think you've got three strong corners as well with Thomas, with Mosley, and with Ward, where you can figure out who becomes the slot corner out of those three. And I think there's better talent elsewhere. Diamond Lenore has shown some skill set. He had a nice catch today, actually, in team drills. A pretty nice acrobatic catch. He's shown some skill set on the outside, and he might be a potential cut candidate. But if you want to keep him, you need to kind of cut a roster spot elsewhere. So I personally want to see, can someone challenge Dennard for that corner two spot, because Dennard got all the cornerback one reps at the slot today. Trey hit that juice type pass to Seattle, or to Debo in the Seattle game. Speaking about Trey, I think Trey Lance's best pass today was to George Kittle. He had a nice tight spiral to the sideline to George Kittle. That was a pretty good connection there. And I'm very interested to see how does that connection grow this year. Kittle talked about it yesterday. He wants to grow that connection with Lance now that Lance is QB1. And I think that Trey Lance will rely on tight ends a little more than you expected Garoppolo to, just because they're the safety blankets, right? I feel like Trey Lance definitely has the ability to stretch the field. Don't get me mistaken, but I think because of his ability to stretch the field, the shorter and intermediate kind of area will be a lot more open, and that's where a lot of those throws will be made. And we saw that today. Brandon Ayuk spoke about it in his post practice press conference. He said how safeties immediately backpedal when Lance is out there at quarterback, which means you have more space in that intermediate range. And knowing Kyle Shanahan and his propensity for getting receivers and tight ends open, I think Kittle could definitely be in the mix to have a top two receiving season for the 49ers. All right, let's see. What UDFA caught your eye today that I might have not mentioned yet? So when we talk about UDFAs, obviously we talk about Poe, Donovan West, Leon O'Neal. We talk about the three linebackers in Gemmel, Olubi, and McCrary Ball. I think I've mentioned most of them, right? And they've caught my eye in good ways and bad ways. Leon O'Neal was out there with I think the second or third team defense overall. I know a lot of people like Leon O'Neal. He did have one good play overall. He also had one play where he did have a misread, but it was mainly on Quantrez Knight, who let a receiver go through in the middle. But Leon O'Neal, I think, he's a nice candidate to make, not to make the roster, but to potentially make the practice squad. I think the 49ers do have their safeties lined up. Dante Johnson did take all of his reps at safety today as well. And it's very interesting because Dante Johnson, I think they trust his coverage skills a lot. He was seen in single high mixes today. He was seen in cover two. He was also seen in single high mixes, as I said, which means they trust him to be that back end safety when Jimmy Ward isn't kind of as a back end safety as well. He's more in the box or he's in the slot. So I think that Dante Johnson honestly will have a good role on this team. I think he's one of the safeties. And also, Tavares Moore was seen as that second team safety as well, behind our two guys in Ward and Hufanga. Moore and Odom were seen as those two safeties. I don't know where Leon O'Neal necessarily fits in the mix, but if we're talking about UDFAs that caught my eye, I would say, this is interesting. I don't think many UDFAs really had a big day today. I know a lot of people really like Jordan Mason, myself included, but he wasn't featured as much in the running game. Instead, it was Trey Sermon who was seen a lot. Tyree Davis Price got reps there. Jermichael Hasty got reps there. Jeff Wilson Jr. got reps there, and Elijah Mitchell got reps there. So it wasn't necessarily as much Mason. We'll see if that progresses as training camp goes along. But right now, it doesn't seem much Jordan Mason yet. I think that Jordan Mason will have a good role. He did flash in minicamp, and I personally like him to potentially make the roster as well. But as of now, there aren't many UDFAs flashing out just because it's the beginning of training camp. Tony here says, keep your eyes on college free agent Tay Martin. I think Tay Martin's a very good player. My guy, Marco Martinez, did mention that he could be the next Kendrick Bourne. I think he has that potential skill set. He's a good receiver, reliable hands, great at the catch point. Tay Martin could be an underrated option to make the roster. And if he doesn't, I think he's 100% a practice squad stash regardless. I think Tay Martin is going to be a 49er in 2022, unless he gets claimed if he doesn't make the roster. Underrated option here. We'll see if he plays special teams. That's the unknown part right now, if Tay Martin's going to have a role on special teams. But definitely keep your eyes on him, like Tony says. How did Ray McLeod look? I actually thought Ray McLeod looked really good. I saw him in two different aspects. I saw him in the punt return game. I saw him as a receiver as well. McLeod seems to be that check down option in the slot. McLeod, or sorry, Ray McLeod seems to be that guy that quarterbacks trust 5 yards down the field where he can make plays with his legs after that. But McLeod was looking pretty good. He obviously flashed a lot in camp. He had a catch today. I forget which quarterback it was off of, but he had a nice catch today in the passing game. I believe it was from Trey Lance, about a 5 yard check down pass, and I think that he definitely looked good today. Not only there, but also as a punt returner. Obviously, there's not much of a defense running at you when there's no pads, but his acceleration was definitely showcased when he was returning punts. Big Play Tay. That's a nice nickname. And the last topic I want to hit today on the running backs, running back Elijah Mitchell was out there. And not only was he there as a running back, but he was also there as a good receiver. Elijah Mitchell, I think, had 2 catches today in the checkdown area, and he didn't drop a single pass. Remember, there were only 3 incompletions. So, again, take it with a grain of salt. But Elijah Mitchell seems like he might be a receiver out of the backfield for the 49ers in 2022. Many people wondered, who is that guy going to be? Anthony Lynn, remember, he's now the new running back coach. He has been a guy who has gotten a lot out of his running backs, especially as receivers. You talk about Austin Eckler, one of the best receiving backs in the NFL. Melvin Gordon even saw action there. And then last year, DeAndre Swift was a top 5 receiving running back in the NFL last year when Anthony Lynn was the offensive coordinator in Detroit. I think that one of these running backs could definitely see an increase in receptions. And right now, it looks like it's Elijah Mitchell. He caught 2 passes, 2 checkdowns today, and he obviously accelerated after that. Looked pretty good. And he had surefire hands last year. 19 receptions, 20 targets, only 1 drop last year on 20 targets. I think that Elijah Mitchell could potentially be a sleeper pick to be a productive running back in the receiving game as well this year, alongside Kyle Juszczyk. Dreadhead David says, if they allow the run game and defense to hold strong for 6 games solid and allow trade again at comfy, we will be a complete team with a great quarterback. This is something that Kyle Shanahan mentioned during his podcast with Tim Kawakami. He doesn't think that Trey Lance is going to be required to hold a lot on his shoulders in the first part. At least he thinks that the defense is very strong. And I mean, on paper, it's very evident the defense is strong. And the receiving options are pretty good. You've got Kittle, you've got Ayuk, you've got Debo Samuel, and you've got a strong offensive line, at least with Trent Williams and Mike McGlinchey. I think that those 2 guys will be nice on the outside. The 49ers would definitely welcome back the presence of Mike McGlinchey. Trey Lance doesn't necessarily have to ball out in the first couple of games. He can get acclimated to the NFL level, get the required reps he needs, and then be prepared to take the 49ers on and raise their ceiling from potentially NFC Championship to Super Bowl as time goes on. Coach Cruz here asks, who looked the best at nickelback? Darqueze Dennard took all the first team snaps at nickelback today. Just like minicamp, right now he seems like the favorite to start. Samuel Womack was the second team nickelback, while Quantrez Knight took the third team nickelback snaps. Knight didn't look as good. I know I spoke about it a little earlier. He did have 1 blown up play where a receiver went by him, but the other 2 guys look fairly solid. It's not they didn't receive too much action today. Again, a fairly so it's a fairly lower day in terms of the amount that they did compared to other practices. Potentially, it's the first practice back. But right now, Darqueze Dennard is the starter at nickelback. Womack is the backup with the second team. All right, guys, I think that is all the questions that you guys had. If you guys have any, be sure to hit me up on Twitter. I am going to go through my mentions, respond to as many questions as I can. Thank you all so much for tuning in. This has been a blast, and I will be here tomorrow breaking down tomorrow's training camp practice, which probably will have some more events because it is day 2. The ramp up continues. Be sure to like and subscribe to this channel. Subscribe to the 49ers Red Zone podcast, and we will be here with some more content sooner